Something that this week in attending Slam Dance has reminded me is that you don't need to be any age to create art, good art. Art comes from whenever you can create it. Doesn't matter if you're the youngest of souls or the oldest of souls. And your journey is yours and yours alone. And it's different for everybody. But the whole idea is that you're on your journey and that you start to make your journey happen. That's what's important. And one thing is for sure, here at Slam Dance 2018, it's always time to go indie now. So in the spirit of Slam Dance and what I've witnessed here this week, I've put together a show for you with this episode of varying age ranges to show you from the very young to the very young in spirit. We have a filmmaker named Tina Jetter, who you'll be introduced to. We also have author Laura Lovett with us, and an author, former journalist named Don Allison. All of these artists have been and doing a journey that is so impressive and so remarkable, and I'm happy to feature them this episode. So without further ado, let's go ahead and start the show, shall we? Tina, having started at such a young age, what advantage do you feel that's given you now that you're taking on the same type of roles in the world as an adult?
The advantage is that I've had a lot of experience, and I've definitely gotten to meet a lot of different people, you know, whether they're actors and actresses or directors, you know, writers, editors, producers. Like, I've gotten to meet a lot of different kind of people throughout all my years, because I started at the age of 4 and I'm 21 now. So I would say that it's given me a lot of connections that, you know, have just grown over the years. You know, I would say a lot of opportunities that I've gotten, I wouldn't have been able to if it wasn't for the connection.
What made you decide to take the leap from actor to filmmaker?
Ever since I started being an actress for filming, I just always had an interest. And even watching like movies or TV shows, it just always interests me, like how it just comes together and everything. So I just made it like a pact in my mind that I would definitely get into that. Thanks to my mom, who's very supportive of me. She actually gave me the money to buy like a Canon camera, which is pretty good. Yeah. Bought on Amazon. I think it was like a Black Friday, so we got a good deal. But yeah, so I had my camera, and then ever since then, I've done a few of my you know, short films, and I've also helped other people out, and it just like it's a good feeling. Like I definitely like acting, but I also love, you know, being behind the camera, because it's way different. I like it.
Having started with short films and then helping others with their short films, do you think that's a great way for a filmmaker to get started?
I would say it doesn't have to be short films. if the first thing you get is a music video, there's nothing wrong with that. If the first thing you get happens to be a feature film, you better take the opportunity. You know what I mean? Like it's like whatever comes along. So I would say don't be like, if someone says like, "Hey, I have a music video I would love for you to shoot. I know you don't have the experience, but let's work together." Like, don't say no. You know what I mean? But I would just say whatever comes along, as long as you like the project, because that is very important. I would say just take it and see how it goes. So I would say don't limit yourself if it's like your first thing, whatever. Like, just go for it, because you don't know where it could take you.
What aspect of the filmmaking process were you surprised to find that it was a little more difficult than you initially might have thought it would have been?
I would say editing for sure, because when I first edited, man, I was up all night editing. Like, just it was just 3 minutes, but it
Yeah.
took, dang, it took a while. So I would say that was a little harder, even though I knew it was gonna be hard. But I didn't think, there was so much to it. Like, making sure
Yeah.
like the footage looks good, making sure you have the right music, the right angles. Like, it was a lot of work. So I would say, if anything, editing, that was definitely the most like surprisingly difficult thing for sure.
Conversely, what do you think was the easiest?
But I would say for me it was acting, because I feel like I'm able to, for the most part, hop into the character's emotion pretty easily and just dive into the role.
What do you think your actors would say about how you direct?
They would probably say I'm a bit of a hard ass, because I kind of am. Like, I really get like down to business. You can ask
Nice.
anybody that I work with. Like, everyone's joking around and laughing. Between takes, I'm like, okay, cut. All right, do again. But I'm definitely like easy to work with. Like, I'll work with people. I'm someone that you can talk to, where it's like, you say, "Hey, like, I'm not really okay with this." Like, I'm someone that will like listen to you and be like, "Okay, so let's work out a compromise." Or if it's like really bad, then I'll be like, "So let's, like, work around it, or possibly just cut it out." Like, I definitely always try to make my cast feel like welcome. Like, don't like minimize them just because they're an actor or an actress. Like, I don't do that. I make sure like all my sets are very equal. So, I can be mean, but I can be nice too. It's just like it's like a balance.
Do you leave room for improv? Do you encourage improv?
For the most part, I feel like this can probably go for like any director. There are definitely some lines where it's like, you got to say it this way. You got to, because it's
Right,
important for the story. Let's say the line's like, "Oh, hey, how's it going?" But you want to say, "Hey, what's up?" Like little stuff like that is whatever. But for the most part, I definitely do encourage, like, definitely know the lines. But of course, the writer does try its best to make it sound as fluent as possible. But
right.
sometimes, depending on the person, they could be like, "I really wouldn't say it that way," and the way that they say it, they make it more real. So
Yeah, sure.
it's always a compromise for that too.
Your mom has been a major influence in your life. You've mentioned it a few times already, and she's virtually the reason why you're here doing what you're doing. Uh, I mean, what I would imagine you have a unique perspective in that. What do you think a parent can do for their child to get them started in this world that you would say is a good thing to do?
They can start the networking for the child, because
Hmm.
like I said, I started at 4, so of course I can't do anything. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But she started it for me. Like, I guess she got insight from other people, like websites to go on to like submit me for, and I guess from there it kind of blossomed.
And I've been go through hell, caught in a vicious spell, blinded by the light, cross course, stumbled and fell. I'm feeling so alone, I think I'm about to explode. System overload.
I had to do it, otherwise they would have killed me.
How could you?
and try not to be a stage mom, you know, because no one likes those.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
What advice would you give to young women who want to be filmmakers?
I would
Nice.
say, don't give up on your dream, because it's it's a very hard journey, and unless a miracle happens, you're going to be on this journey for a long time before hopefully something amazing happens for you. Like, you don't know what could take you where. So I would say, definitely don't give up.
What do you like about being an independent artist? What do you like about being indie?
I think it's definitely different than if it was like being represented, I guess, per
Okay.
se. It definitely gives me a lot more freedom, to take a lot more chances and opportunities for sure. So for me, like, I do it because I actually love it, and it puts a smile on my face, and it makes my heart feel full and complete. And I think the best feeling is you're representing yourself,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like I'm representing myself, and I'm being me. I don't have to pretend. You know what I mean? Or
Yeah.
I don't, or don't take on this kind of job because it could go really south. Like, this is all my choice, and I think I love that the most. It's all my decisions that I'm making throughout this whole industry. But yet I'm still on this road because I don't listen to what people have to say. It's kind of like, what do I want to do? And this is what I want to do, so I'm going to do it. And hopefully if it does take me somewhere, I can look back and be like, imagine if I listened to you. I would never have gotten to where I've gotten. And I've definitely gotten very far from where I've started,
Mm-hmm.
mostly because of my mom. But I feel like hopefully, if all goes well, we don't know where it could take me. But like I feel like I'm at a place in my life where I'm actually okay if
Mm-hmm.
I never get famous. Like definitely
Sure.
if you're doing this because you want to get famous or just get money, like if that's all you're doing it for, like don't do it, because it's not a good reason whatsoever to be in this type of industry.
I did not hit her. It's not true. It's bullshit. I did not hit her. I did not. Oh, hi, Mark.
Hello, everyone. And if you've been in any kind of film and you've been up to date in what's been happening in film last year with the release of The Disaster Artist, you would know that scene right there is by far one of the most quoted in the world, in my opinion. Not just that, if you pull up anything about The Room, which is the movie I'm going to be reviewing today, you'll see that it is by far the most watched and rewatched and sold out movie since its creation. Now, why am I reviewing this movie? Because I think, in all honesty, it is the best quintessential indie film to come out of my generation. I think Tommy Wiseau is around my age. He's in his mid to late 40s, I think. I'm not doing a background check on him. I'm not even pulling up any of his data because I would like to think that he's in my generation. Lay claim to him right now. He belongs to our generation. And the movie The Room is by far the most brilliant indie film ever made. The fact that he was able to get all the funding on his own. The fact that he himself cast himself as the lead. He himself wrote the script. And by the way that it jumps around, he found the places where he wanted to change it, and he changed it. And that being said, I think that's a true image of an indie filmmaker, an indie artist, an indie writer, is you get to choose the way you do things. You get to choose the way you view your own things. And you get to choose what you're going to do with your project. It's your baby. You do it as you want it, and you release it, and you show it as you want it. And I think he succeeded. I think people are wrong by saying that it is the horror movies. They're saying that it's the worst movie ever made, and that's what makes it watchable. But I think for myself that it is the Citizen Kane of our generation. I think that go 50 years in the future, and you're going to see people quoting this movie not as a worst movie, but as a great movie that was created in such a unique way. And it led to, I think, a resurgence in actual indie filmmakers. And if you look at a lot of these trophy film festivals that are mostly populated by mainstream directors and mainstream actors who are, A actors, and they're lending their name to a movie or they're creating a movie, they get more hype than the lowly indie filmmaker who's making his own film on his own back pocket budget, as well as he can. And I say this not just as a critic of film, but I say this as I'm making my own film, and I know now how hard it is to make a film. I know the cost and the blood, sweat, and tears that it takes. The fact that you have to do so much just to get that one scene right. And I think The Room is quintessential to showing us that. And I think this film should be watched. And it should be watched and praised rather than watched and scoffed. Yes, the acting is stiff, but that's the way he wanted it. And that's his personality if you've seen him. James Franco does a great job in The Artist, the Disaster Artist film. But if you're going to watch the Disaster Artist film, you should watch The Room first. It came out first, it's based on it, and you will get so much more out of the Disaster Artist if you watch The Room first. And this is Jin OKUBO for GoIndieNow in my new position as doing indie film review. Please look out for more stuff from me. You guys have a good one. Thank you.
A perfect world.
These are for you.
Thanks, honey. They're beautiful.
A perfect life.
I would do anything for my girl. I love you, Lisa.
I love you, Johnny.
Surprise!
He provides for you. Darling, you can't support yourself.
I don't love him anymore. He didn't get his promotion. And he got drunk last night. And he hit me.
It's not true. I did not hit her. Well, maybe you should have a girl, Mark.
Yeah, maybe you're right. Maybe I have one already. I don't know yet.
We can't do this anymore. Johnny's my best friend. This will be our secret.
Don't worry. You can trust me.
We are expecting.
I'm your future husband.
You sure about that?
Please talk to me, please.
You're having an affair with Lisa, aren't you?
I need more from life than what Johnny can give me.
She's a sociopath. She can't love anyone.
There is no baby. I told him that to make it interesting.
You're such a manipulative witch.
You're hurting yourself. You're hurting our friendship.
I treat you like a princess, and you stab me in the back. You are tearing me apart, Lisa! Hey, Danny.
Where's my money, Danny?
Put the gun down.
What the hell is wrong with you? Just shut up.
What? Hey! Stop it out of this world!
So Laura, with your academic background and your degree and career in the psychology field, what is it about creative writing and fiction that captured you?
Well, I think I have a creative talent, and it's something that I've always had since I was a young child, and it's something I've always wanted to do. Losing Cadence, it took me 8 years to write because I went through my own career crisis, and I was working for a company as a consultant, and I was traveling a lot and stuff, and then our whole team got laid off in Canada. It was a company based in the US, and when I got laid off, I actually went to see a career counselor, and I said, okay, I'm 27 years old, I'm debating whether I should do my doctorate in psychology or become a novelist. And literally, I went through career counseling for that, and it was really, really helpful because the decision was made that I'm too extroverted. I'm very extroverted, and to be a novelist full time would have been too much time on my own, and it was a higher risk venture for someone who's a high achiever like me. It was a higher risk venture, so I decided I would do the writing as a hobby and do the career in psychology, which was more a sure thing. I knew I could do it, and then I started losing cadence right before I started my doctorate. So I started it, and then I would stop, and I'd find more time in the summers than during the school years. And then at the end of the PhD, I had my son, and then I had another son 2 years later. And then, so it was just one thing after another. And then I started 3 businesses during those years. So it took me 8 years to finish losing cadence, which is a very inefficient way to write a book. Very inefficient, because my maturity and my writing style changed over 8 years. So I had to keep going back to the beginning of it. And whereas my second book took me 15 months. So like now I know how to get things done faster when I have a timeline and a passion.
What is your process? Are you a pantser, plotter? What do you like? How do you like to approach the writing process?
Definitely a pantser. So definitely when I'm writing, it's as if I'm watching a movie. So I don't know how it's going to end. I don't know what's going to happen next. And it's really fun that way. If I had to map it all out in a detailed outline, to me, that would seem similar to work. It would seem more like work, and it wouldn't be as fun. Yeah.
So then you took, once it was done, you took it out there and shopped it and tried to, did you go for, were you looking at agents, or were you looking at publishers, or did you try both, or?
Well, I was sitting on the book, and then I met an editor who was a friend, and well, she turned into a friend, but she essentially said, I said, I wrote this book, and she said, oh, can I read it? And she said, what the heck? She said, this is better than Gone Girl. She said, why haven't you done anything? And I said, well, I'm so busy with my other stuff. And she said, well, I'll help you shop it out to agents, and I can be your editor. And I said, well, I need a project manager because I don't have time to stay on top of like even the publishing process, even if I got. And she said, okay. So we shopped it out to 100 agents. But by shopping it out, I mean queries, right? I didn't get to meet them face to face. And I think if I could have secured an agent easier. Now that I've been to conferences and seen that process, I think I'd have a better shot that way. Then I think the queries, I think they're overwhelmed with emails, and a project comes through and they say, that sounds interesting, but I'm just full, right? Like, I don't know who this Laura is, Dr. Laura, who is she, and whatnot. So I didn't have luck with an agent, and I almost gave up on the project after all those PFOs, I call them. But I was getting PFOs over email during my work days, right? I get agents, thanks, but no thanks, thanks, but no thanks, and all this. And I thought, okay, my book's not really worth doing anything about. And I was quite put off, and I thought about giving up at that point.
Mm.
Yeah, and my editor said, look, there's this self-publishing option now. You could be an indie author, and there's actually pros to that. You don't have a boss, right? And I'm not used to having a boss. I'm used to running my own companies, running my own show. So this started to appeal to me, this idea of, okay, well, let's give it a shot.
What in your mind is the key to creating a good psychological thriller? What elements does it have to have?
Well, I think it has to grab people's attention from the start, and I think I've been good at that with both of my books, the first book, Losing Cadence, and the sequel, Finding Sophie. And I think it has to have lots of twists and turns and unpredictability, like any thriller, whether it's crime or whether it's, any type of thriller needs to have twists and turns, unpredictability. And then I think the thing with a psychological thriller is it has to almost play with people's emotions, where they hate the antagonist, but they also love the antagonist. Their emotions are mixed about the person, right? Because the person is multifaceted, and I think I've done well at that with my antagonist, especially in the second book, where we get into his backstory and childhood. And my editor said at my book launch last week, she said, I dare you not to fall in love with Richard, Laura's antagonist, even though you hate him in the first book, right? You hate him. So it's an emotional roller coaster, but in a good way. It's not, I don't want to disturb people. I don't want people to feel like it sticks with them in a disturbing way or they can't sleep because of it. But I want them to stay up late and not sleep because they're page turning.
Did you always have a sequel in mind, or is it something that came about when you're writing the first book, or was it based on feedback from readers? How did the sequel come about?
I didn't know if I would do a sequel for sure or not, because I needed to build confidence that this was going to entertain a lot of readers. And I said to my editor, if people ask about a sequel and they want it, then I'll be interested in writing it. And then sure enough, people who read it said, oh my God, when is the sequel coming? When is it coming? My editor said, Laura, you need to write it in the next 18 months. Otherwise, all your followers forget the first book. Right? And I said, well, I'm really busy. I'm a businesswoman. I'm a mother of 3 kids. How am I going to do this? And then I had to make a decision. And I decided that it was a really good outlet for me. I enjoyed the time. It was a break from reality. And I wanted to find out what happened. So then I wrote Finding Sophie. And I set the book 12 years later, and I'm told that it's better than the first book. I'm told that it toys with your emotions, and it's just people can't put it down. So I'm very happy about that. And then I had to make a decision, Joe, about doing a trilogy. And usually in thrillers, you don't have a trilogy in thrillers.
Right.
A lot of thrillers are one-offs, right? And so I think it's unusual even to have a sequel, although Girl with the Dragon Tattoo and stuff like that was a trilogy. So I decided, well, I made a decision, and you'll be able to see if you read it, what happens if it's going to be a trilogy or just the sequel.
What did you learn from writing the first book that you applied to writing the sequel?
I learned not to be too wordy, because then you end up having to cut all those words out anyway. And time is not my friend, so I had to be very efficient with my time. You know, you can always add later, but you need to get the story down.
Were there any unique challenges in writing a sequel that you didn't expect?
Yeah, I mean, the challenge of making sure you're consistent with the facts in the first book. And if I hadn't read it in a while, so I had to refer back to it to be consistent, knowing that some people would read both books in a row, right?
Right.
The second challenge was the second book took more research than the first book, because the second book is set on a super yacht or a mega yacht, which is one of the biggest yachts in the world. So I had to talk to a yacht expert. I had to talk to a military expert from the Navy. I had to talk to a helicopter expert, right? I had to get a lot of facts down that in the first book didn't apply as much. I didn't have to do as much research.
What do you cherish most about being indie?
I like that I have control over my own project and my own destiny. I like the term indie better than the term self-published. I still think there's a bit of a stigma, and I don't like that when people, some people say, "Oh, who's your publisher?" And then you have to say, "Oh, I went on my own. I'm independent," right? And then you can see that they're just, some of them are judging, because I think there's a problem. There's a lot of, anyone can self-publish, so then you get the whole gamut of complete flakes. And I've bought a few of those books, and you read the book and you think, oh my goodness, it wasn't even edited. I can't even read this because I'm seeing mistakes every sentence. And there's the whole gamut. And I think the whole world of publishing is changing, and I like to be on the forefront of things in my career and in my life. And I think being an indie is at the forefront, because I think if you have the right marketing and the right network and everything, you can end up doing better than you could with a traditional publisher that takes a big percent of all your profits. And from what I understand from talking to other authors who have been both traditional and indie, and some of them both, they've said the traditional publishers, they do a lot leading up to your launch, and then they desert you and they're on to the next project. So essentially then you have to do your own publicity and marketing anyway. And I would be really ticked off if I had to be investing in all of that and they were taking X% of my profits off the top for years thereafter. I think that would feel really unfair.
where you're at, Calgary especially, but Canada in general, they're known for majestic landscapes, scenic environments, and you touched on this with going to retreats and stuff like that. So is that the most important thing to you in terms of when you write, where you write? Do you think it makes a huge difference?
I do think it makes a difference, and so we had a summer property on a lake in Montana, and it was off the grid, and it's just this beautiful water. It's almost like you're in the Caribbean because the water's aqua color, and there's turtles that swim by, and it is amazing, this lake. And yeah, and it's not for everyone because being off the grid had a lot of challenges as well. But I wrote a lot of the books there, and it was very just being in nature and stuff was just a great place for being relaxed and feeling a creative outlet. But could I write at home in the living room? Yes, absolutely. I think the bigger thing for me, the view is really important, but it's not a deal breaker. The deal breaker is having quiet. I'm not the type that can have music going and all this. I have to have absolute quiet in order to let my creative process flow.
Loved your blog. How great!
Thank you.
How great a tool has that been for your author career? And do you think it's something that every author should have?
I think it has been useful to have a blog and an e-newsletter. So I was doing my e-newsletter every 2 months because I'm so busy. And then I went to an excellent session at a conference at the Surrey International Writers Conference, which is an awesome one. If you want to go to one in Canada, that's the one to go to. It's just fantastic. Yeah, I went to a session by Stina Holmes, who's a best-selling author. And she said every month is best. And new e-newsletter is critical for indie authors because she was on Twitter and Twitter cut her off for a few days. She said, at any point in time, these social media channels could cut you off for doing something inadvertently that you didn't mean to do. And I thought, oh my goodness, right? I have almost 600 on my Facebook, but what if something went wrong? Like, what if it was just hacked? And then you lost all of that, right?
Yeah, right.
And Facebook's charging you every step of the way to boost now anyway. And she said e-newsletters absolutely critical. So I think to answer your question, monthly e-newsletter is critical if you're looking at growing followership and readers.
Complete this sentence for me. When I write, I am
in a state of flow. And flow means that you're highly engaged in what you're doing to the point that time goes by so quickly and you are just passionate about what you're doing. And it doesn't feel like work.
Greetings, fellow humans. If you hear something odd in the background, that's because the wonderful Joe Compton invited me to review indie music. And here's me having coffee and sharing some fine music. When it comes to indie music, a lot of people think of different types of bands, but when it comes to indie music, the variety of independent artists that you can find is impressive. Case in point, Lowercase Noises. Andy Offlin is someone who lives in, I'm pretty sure it's New Mexico, probably Albuquerque. He says that he's interested in playing guitars as slow as possible. His music, as you can see, is very atmospheric, and I'm recommending it for several reasons. First off, a lot of people don't know who Lowercase Noises are, or is. Second off, we have such lead such intense lives, especially indie creators, that we have to jump through so many hoops that sometimes we gotta chill. And this is wonderful music to chill to, and it's wonderful music to write to, and it's wonderful music to meditate to, and to stretch to, and to do yoga stretches, which is what I do every night. There are several bands that I listen to when I'm winding down, and Lowercase Noises is among my favorites. It's also the type of music that I listen to when I need something more ethereal or hopeful. There's language in music that doesn't translate to words, and with the exception of one of his releases, Andy normally plays instrumentals like this. He does these wonderful loops, and the quality varies. If you see the latest release, which is this one, which is, of course, It's All Things. It's very polished, it's very clean, it's very nice. If you check ambient songs, you can hear him clicking the pedals, and it actually adds to the experience to me. And it goes to show that one person with one instrument and recording equipment can create something that can impact your lives. Lowercase Noises has a Bandcamp site. That's how I discovered Andy. Out of his 15 releases, I have like 7. The releases are, of course, It's All Things, which I haven't heard, Terra Incognita, which I haven't heard, The Swiss Illness, which I haven't heard, James, which I have heard, This Is For Our Sins, which I think is the only one with vocals, Blake, which I own, Passage, which I own, Skylights, which I haven't heard, Vivian, which I've heard. Blake, Vivian, and James are named after his children, by the way. Migratory Patterns, which I do have, Carry Us All Away, which I do have, Ambient Songs, which I do have, Marshall and Seafront, which I do have. So I think I have more than 7. That said, it's music to think to, and it's not the first thing that you think when you hear, you know, the term indie music. It's not, you know, instrumentals. Really? Is that what you think when you listen to indie music? I don't think so. But I wanted him to be the first band that I share, because I've been listening to several years, to Lowercase Noises for several years, and honestly, I think we deserve a moment to chill out. So check them out, by all means, enjoy.
My name is Anais Charchenko, and I am a writer. So far, I have published 4 books, 2 poetry and 2 young adult. My most recent book is called Perfect Break. Here it is. And it is a verse novel about best friends, dangerous secrets, and sewer cats. Basically, the whole premise is that after best friends Claire and Madison are separated for the summer, they promise to tell each other everything. You know how it is when you're best friends, right? But one of the friends starts keeping dangerous secrets, so can their friendship survive that? That is basically the premise. So, I am going to read you from near the beginning of the book, and it is when Claire first starts to get a suspicion that Maddie might be keeping a secret. Dearest Maddie, I've seen mountains and a volcano. Did you know Mount St. Helens blew up and ash rained down on the cities? I talked to an old woman who lived here and she told me. It coated her throat, her car, her house, even her sidewalk was gray with this stuff. It reminds me of the feeling I get in my stomach when I know you aren't telling me something. What is a volcano, Maddie? All you're sending me is ash. Loved, Claire. And then this is the next one. St. Helens DNA. Claire. I looked up Mount St. Helens after your message. The pictures are something. I wish I could have been there, coated in a real substance that others could easily see. Then they'd know and there wouldn't be this weird disconnect. I don't know how to talk about this stuff right now. My mom told me I look too much like him. I went to the mirror and I tried to wipe the him part off my face, but it's stuck. It's in me. His DNA. Mads. This one's faulty. Madison, you look like you to me, not your mom or your dad, truly, just like you. When my mom was dying, my grandma yelled at me in the hospital. I'd forgotten to put on my mask and she lost it. She told me I was killing my mom and it was my fault, my fault, my fault. It played in my head a long time, Madness, until she asked for my forgiveness. I guess what I'm trying to say is, when everything falls apart, people are just pieces of who they should be, and eventually would come back together again, maybe a different shape. Like now there is Rachel, but still a family puzzle. I hope this makes sense. Sorry people are cruel when they are freaking out. Love, Claire Bear. Thank you for listening.
Hi everyone, I'm here today in my tricorn hat to talk about my seafaring fantasy novel, Ghosts of a Sea Moon, Saga of the Outer Islands, Book 1. So, I'm A.F. Stewart, I write fantasy and I also write horror novels, and I've been known to write a few poetry books as well. This is the first book in the Saga of the Outer Islands series. And the book tells the tales of Captain Rafe Morrow and his crew of the Celestial Jewel. And they sail the Outer Islands and they fight sea monsters and the mad goddess of the moon in the book. So anyway, and here I'm going to read you a little bit of the first chapter. It's Chapter 1, The Captain. Captain Rafe Morrow paced the quarterdeck of his ship, Celestial Jewel, the signs of an oncoming squall setting him on edge. Blustering wind rattled the sails and the crew's nerves, their usual jaunty hubbub reduced to grumbling and snipes. Trouble traveled on that wind. Rafe could smell it woven in the air, and his blood prickled with a sense of worry. The ship trembled as if with warning. He glared at the sky, and its darkening clouds painted amber and crimson from the setting sun. A storm sky coming ahead of a full moon meant dark magic and sea monsters would prowl the waves this night. The moon goddess will hold sway tonight. A trickle of blue energy raced across the back of his hand at the thought. Damn her and her beasts. On the breath of a sigh, he whirled to face his crew. Storm's coming, boys. Doesn't bode well, not with the moonrise tonight. How long, Captain? Will we be in the thick of the weather, or just what comes after? A rough-edged sailor, Pinky Jasper, spoke up, but all ears of the deck crew listened for an answer. It's coming within the hour or two, out from Raven Rock, by my reckoning. After nightfall, by certain. We're heading in, boys, but we'll likely hit the edge of it. He heaved a breath, exhaling. It'll be a bad one, even for this crew, so expect trouble. A shiver of tension settled over the deck. Some of the crew cast worried glances at the sea and each other. Others shivered. and a few more whispered prayers. Storms brought bad memories and nervous anticipation to the sailors of this ship. "Which port then, Captain?" The mariner at the ship's wheel chimed in. "Might make Aberystwyth if we head north." "We might, Anders, but we head east. We'll race the edge of the tempest, but it's closer, and the ship will find better shelter anchored at Crickwell Island." "Aye, sir, laying in course to Crickwell Island." One-eyed Anders turned the wheel, and the ship's bones groaned. Others of the crew adjusted the sails, and the Celestial Jewel leaned into her new bearing, headed east. Okay, so that's a little bit from the first chapter of Ghosts of the Sea Moon. And you can find this book on Amazon and Kobo, Barnes & Noble, iTunes, all those lovely stores. So I hope you take a look, and thank you. Bye-bye.
Hey guys, C.L. Cannon here from Fiction Atlas Press. I am the publisher and organizer of this A Twist of Fate charity anthology. All the proceeds from this anthology, 100%, are going to the Global Scoliosis Foundation. And we've already managed to raise $299 from our Facebook fundraiser. And we've also raised almost $100 in book sales in the last 2 weeks for this organization, which makes me so happy. Thank you so much for all the support. I want to tell you a little bit about why we chose the Global Scoliosis Foundation. I myself have scoliosis. I've been diagnosed since I was about 11 years old. I had to wear a back brace from the time I was 11 until I was 16. And I still have a pretty severe curve. In fact, I've been qualified as a disabled person because of this curve that I have. But scoliosis is a disease that affects a lot of people. It's more prevalent in girls, but boys also do get it. And what the Global Scoliosis Foundation does is they do research, they help financially for children who need braces, who need physical therapy, and who need spinal fusion surgery. I'm really proud to be supporting them. Now let me tell you a little bit about my story. Of course, all the stories in A Twist of Fate are fairy tale retellings. Some of them are modernized and some of them are still in the old settings. Mine is a modern retelling of East of the Sun, West of the Moon, or as some people know it, the Polar Bear King. My story is called East of the Bronx.
Hello, this is Sarah Berman, the author of the Runespells series, among so many other things. And my contribution is a little tale called Free Gift with Purchase. It is a twisted fairy tale take on the Elves and the Shoemaker.
Once upon a time, in a land far, far away called Seattle, there was once a paranormal erotic romance author who wanted to write for a family-friendly anthology. Since she couldn't write dirty, she went for weird. Hi, I'm Linnea Knott, one of the authors privileged to have her story in A Twist of Fate anthology. And so my contribution to the anthology is called The Princess Tests. It's a take on the Princess and the Pea story, and it's written from the perspective of the peas.
Hi, my name is Kay Matt, and I am both an author and an illustrator. So, my contribution to this anthology is a story called Rampage, which involves a rock star's hair being cursed to come to life and start killing people.
My name is Stephanie Barr, and I am a writer of fantasy and science fiction. The story that I wrote was Fiona Fay's Silver Tongue and the King, which is a twist on The Nightingale by Hans Christian Andersen.
I'm A.F. Stewart. I write fantasy and horror novels, and I'm here to talk to you today about the anthology A Twist of Fate and my story in the anthology, The Quest of the Six Swans. It's based on the classic fairy tale, The Six Swans, and it's a continuation written in steampunk genre.
3 months of this routine, and I've gotten to know Jack pretty well. Though he claims to be a shut-in, he likes to talk about anything and everything. Books, travel, and childhood ambitions are topics we cover most often. He is a lover of science fiction and fantasy, while I enjoy mysteries and the odd romance. I've never traveled further than Jersey, and he's been to Egypt, Rome, and most of Western Europe more times than he can count. He had wanted to own a bookshop, and I wanted to be a ballroom dancer, a Power Ranger, and a marine biologist. We are very different people, but somehow it doesn't seem to matter much. I've gotten used to talking through a wall of glass, and he's adjusted to my less than classy culinary choices. Well, for the most part.
Bridget burst through the door with her arms full. There was a lovely faux Thai restaurant down the street, and she couldn't get enough of the peanut sauce that came with the crab rangoon. Her eyes immediately went to the sofa where she'd left the pillow and the little man, and they widened with shock. The pillow was gone. The shawl was gone. The creature was gone. Bridget dropped the bags on the kitchen counter and searched the open floor plan apartment with awe. She wasn't terribly messy, but she didn't get as much time to clean as she would like. However, her apartment was sparkling clean. The shawl was hanging on the corner of the sofa again, looking decades newer. Even the small hole that she'd gotten in the habit of picking at while watching reality shows had been repaired. The plate she'd left with the cornbread was missing, and she found it in the dish rack next to the sink. The pillow was sitting against the arm of the overstuffed chair, looking particularly fluffed, its distinctive little ink stain gone. "What the—" Bridget murmured. "What happened here?" "Ciao, Bella," called a small voice near her feet. Bridget jumped and clapped her hand against her chest. "Holy crap, don't do that!"
What on earth are you doing with those peas? The queen went on to explain that we are the final test for the princesses. Once they've passed the other tasks set before them, the final test would be by pee. She planned to stack mattresses to the ceiling that the princess would sleep on. Under the bottom of the last mattress is where one of my siblings or I would go. If the princess were unable to sleep from the lumpiness, she would be deemed acceptable. She would become one of the candidates for the prince to choose from. To parley with the prince, she would have to pass the pee. So far, none of them had gotten close to being tested by us. Therefore, we spent our days sunning ourselves in the morning light. We would then take a dip in the water dish provided for us. A servant would scoop us out with a spoon, dry us off, and place us back on our silky, soft cushions. We would listen to the birds sing in the trees outside. We also heard the princesses grunting below. They were climbing this, hauling that, and balancing atop something else. It was quite the circus. The queen sometimes brought us with her to watch. The queen took it all in with a measure of enjoyment and a pleasant, encouraging smile in their presence. Out of earshot, the queen would cackle without reservation. Her plan seemed to be working, although one woman would prove to be quite different.
What is the last thing you remember? Rampage rubbed the back of his neck. I just finished a concert and was heading back to my tour bus. My girlfriend was waiting for me and gave me some hot water, honey, and lemon. I think she threw in some pepper or something too, because it tasted spicy. The doctor pondered this for a moment. And has she done this before? Rampage nodded. Yeah, she brings stuff from my throat all the time. The pepper's new, though. Spencer frowned slightly. Is there any left? I'd like to get it analyzed. The rocker shrugged. I don't know, doctor. I passed out after I had some, so I've got no idea how much is left. Then something occurred to him. Do you think she drugged me? With a shrug, Dr. Abbott sighed. I wouldn't exactly be shocked. Have there ever been any issues between you two lately? Anything that might lead to her wanting to drug you? Of course not, Rampage scoffed. Things have been rock solid between us. It must have been one of the girls I brought in last night. They were both all over me. Travis raised an eyebrow, his tail twitching. And she's open to this? He asked. Well, yeah, she's never yelled at me for it. The doctor and the half-monkey exchanged glances, neither of them quite believing what they'd been hearing. And before either of them could get another word in, Rampage's hair started to slither down the sidewalk, dragging him along with it. He screamed, the leather of his vest, pants, and boots being the only thing protecting his flesh from the pavement he was currently being raked against.
Fiona rolled to a seated position and then waited a few seconds for her head to stop spinning. He wants to know why you'd be arresting us, given we've committed no crime. You're the bard, ain't you? Is singing now illegal in this country, said Xeris? Why, King Brass seemed quite pleased with Lady Silvertongue's performance and gave us a vast quantity of wine, along with a nice purse of gold. He frowned, his smooth white brow furrowed, though perhaps it was poison, given the state of my head. Fiona tried to shake her own head, then stopped so her eyes wouldn't pop out. It wasn't poison, we just drank too much of it. She eyed the soldier. I'm a bard, yes. Fiona Fay Silvertongue. Are you looking for me? Aye, King Croner of Chinan. Want you to sing at court. Get your stuff. Xeris's odd eyes, nearly white irises with a rim of dark blue, flashed. He cleared his throat, and he spoke in resonant tones that made Fiona's head pound. Is this how King Croner invites an artist of Lady Silvertongue's caliber to his court? Apprehended like a common felon and dragged in chains? Nay, nay, sir, this will never do. She is no street performer or unschooled yokel, but a diva of surpassing accomplishment, revered in courts throughout the land. The point of the soldier's sword had fallen away, and the man looked at Xeris, dumbfounded. He shook his head and asked Fiona pointedly, "You always talk like that?"
Stefan brushed away a feather tickling his nose, then a second off his cheek, and a third from his pillow. He sat upright in his bed, flexing his limbs, and frowned as feathers drifted across the bedclothes. Stefan sighed. His wing molted again. It was probably the dream. He could still see the images, so much like the memory. His sister being led to her execution, her husband's stony face, their beating wings above her head. In his mind he heard her cries as she threw the nettled shirts on their backs, though the wonder is he and his brothers transformed from swan to man, feathers to flesh, the curse broken at last. Only in the dream I regained both my arms, not just the one. In the dream my stepmother pays for what she did, a happy ending instead of. He wriggled out from under the coverings and dangled his feet until his bare toes touched the fur rug on the floor. He absently kicked at another feather and watched it float into a ray of morning sunshine, beaming through a crack in the window draperies. It stirred his memory, bringing a sliver of regret. Sometimes he missed the sensation of flying across the sky, basking in the sun. He stretched his distorted left limb into the light, his alabaster wings, and let the sunshine dance about his downy surface. He brushed the soft plumes with his right fingertips and wished he could brush away his pain as easily. If only. His mouth spoke those first tantalizing words, a forever promise of a future stolen by his stepmother. He closed his eyes.
I hope that you will enjoy this anthology, enjoy my story, as well as the stories of the 10 other amazing authors who have given their time to this charity anthology. So thank you very much.
So, Don, what was it about the Civil War that enthralled and captured you so much that you wanted to immerse yourself in it?
Well, I really was immersed in it from early childhood. My mother is from Alabama. My dad is from Ohio. They met when he was in the service in the Korean War era. They married. They took up housekeeping in Ohio, but I spent time every summer, sometimes other parts of the year, visiting Alabama. I knew I had family on both sides of the war. I had a couple of uncles who actually took me to Civil War sites in Columbus, Georgia. Unfortunately, those have been developed. There's a Kmart on one of them, but we used to kick around the old entrenchments. My dad would take me to battlefields when we were there, and I just became fascinated.
What is your process in determining what story from the period that you want to tell? How do you decide what you're going to write about?
I just instinctively know. I don't really give it much thought process. Actually, the first book that I decided to write, really 30 years ago, and I started researching it at the time, is still not published, although it's in manuscript form, and it will be coming out hopefully next year finally. But it's a history of the 38th Ohio Regiment. It's a unit from my home area. I had family in the unit, and I have a co-author for that project, Richard Cooley. He also had family in the unit. As it turns out, our great-great-grandfathers knew each other.
One thing you researched that you surprised to find more easily than maybe you anticipated finding it?
It would have to have been my first Civil War book. It's Hell on Belle Isle, Diary of a Civil War POW. And the book kind of found me. I was actually researching the 38th Ohio book. My co-author had found a letter written by a 38th Ohio veteran to a Bryan, Ohio newspaper in the 1930s. And just in the corner of the copy he made for microfilm was a notice of a Civil War soldier's diary that was in Edgerton, Ohio. It intrigued me. I did some research. I found out that the original diary had burned in a house fire, but it had been published in serial form in a weekly newspaper. And I knew the publisher. That was, I was given access to the back issues from the 1930s to make copies. And I thought, boy, it's going to be difficult to find information on, the prison he was in Richmond, Virginia, not a really well-known prison. And just information about the treatment of the prisoners, his subsequent burial, those types of things, things fell into place for me incredibly easy. I'm kind of a bit of a spiritual person, and I almost believe that he wanted his story told, and I guess the world kind of paved the way for it.
What is your opinion on the reenactments that people do?
I think in some ways they're very good. I actually have been a reenactor for a long time. I don't do it a lot. I find that it's a very great way for me to understand the tactics of the war when I write about them, some of the common things that the soldiers experienced. I think some people on the downside, use them to maybe glorify the war. They don't, I think, appreciate just how bloody and nasty and horrible the war really was. But I think from an educational viewpoint, I've had kids view reenactments, or I've gone and talked to schools in uniform and talked about the life of the soldier, and I think that has great educational value.
Do you think there's a value to the camaraderie of it as well?
I think there definitely is. I have made some incredible friends in the reenactment community, and many of those friends have turned out to be great resources in the historian community. It's led to me to learn or reach very knowledgeable people to serve as editors of my books. Although I'm an independent publisher, I go through a very strict vetting process, historical accuracy, fact checking, and I've made some great friends who have been invaluable in that regard.
Did you ever think about or contemplate tackling this subject as a work of fiction?
It has crossed my mind. I've dabbled in fiction through the years. I love to read fiction. I just feel that my talents lie more toward nonfiction. I've never had any fiction published, but I can't say that I never will. That's always been in the back of my mind.
Give us one experience in doing the research for the paranormal stuff that really shook you and that stuck with you.
The one that led me to write the book came about, and I've had through the years some odd experiences at Gettysburg. 2 years ago, my grandson and I went to Gettysburg. This was for history. He had been there with us once years ago when he was quite young. He was 14 at the time, and we went there just to study history, but I registered as a journalist so that I could get some behind the scenes things while we're there. One of the offerings given to us was a ghost investigation. And I thought, being a teenager, I didn't want him to be bored. And I told him about this. He said, "Yeah, sounds cool, Grandpa, let's do it." So I called up and they told us that, yeah, we'll take you to Sachs Bridge. And I'm thinking, Sachs Bridge, when I had seen it, my wife and I actually honeymooned in Gettysburg many, many years ago. Sachs Bridge is just an ancient, old, dilapidated, covered bridge. Didn't really impress me a whole lot, but the gentleman I was talking to said, "You will like Sachs Bridge." And I thought, okay. So that evening we meet up with a young lady who seemed very knowledgeable, and she takes us to Sachs Bridge. She brings out all sorts of different equipment. Now, mind you, I'm thinking this is just a touristy thing. I was not expecting anything of it. I'm here to entertain my grandson. So we chose different items, electromagnetic field meters, EMF meters. The theory is that the spirits give off, the electromagnetic energy. We used a laser grid, and we also used something I was not familiar with. It's called a ghost box. It's a little, basically it scans radio stations, frontwards, backwards, AM, FM, you set the speed, and the theory is it creates white noise that a spirit can use to communicate. If you're familiar with EVPs, electronic voice phenomena, where you get recordings, where you don't hear with your ear, but you do get recordings. So, okay, we'll try this. Well, this investigation was to be 2 hours. And there were a lot of other people on the bridge. I was not impressed, although the young lady seemed very knowledgeable. We go across the bridge, we go out on the field. She proceeds to tell us about what took place around Sachs Bridge. I had no clue, but it was one vast field hospital toward the end and after the battle. The Confederates used the bridge in their retreat route, left some of their more severely wounded men there, some of their prisoners who also were badly wounded. They didn't think they could stand a wagon ride south, just were left in the open air and in the buildings around here. I did not know that. I found that interesting, but we're there for almost 2 hours and we had gotten like nothing. Well, I won't say quite nothing. With the spirit box, she asked questions throughout this time period. At one time, she said, "Can you tell us what color coat one of us is wearing?" And we did get a clear blue, and I was wearing a blue coat, but I was underwhelmed at this point. We're going back to the bridge. The crowd's thinning out. Our guide, her name was Destiny, kind of jumped and said that, "Did you see that?" And she had seen a shadow figure. Well, I believed her. I didn't see it. Neither did my grandson. We go back across the bridge, go into the woods on the other side. My grandson had a similar experience in it. He obviously had seen something and was a bit affected by it. I, again, didn't see it. It was a shadow figure. So by then we go back to the bridge. It's totally empty. Everybody else had left. Our 2 hours is up, but our guide started asking some questions, and she says, "Anyone here with us?" We got a clear yes. Hey, this is kind of cool. She said, "Well, how many of you are there?" We got a 7, 8, 9. And I'm kind of perking up. So, all right, this is kind of interesting. And it kind of faded out. It was getting cold. It was after time to leave. So she was going to start the car and warm it up. So my grandson and I are sitting there, and I thought, okay, I drew on my study of the war. Like, okay, if I were somebody, oh, and I forgot to mention, she said, "What year is it?" And we got somewhat garbled, but very clear 3. And it sounded very much like 1863. To us. I thought that's kind of cool too. That's the year of course, the Battle of Gettysburg. So Connor and I are sitting there. She's starting the car, and I said, "Do you like jokes?" Got a very clear, polite, "Yes, sir." And I'm kind of sitting up. All right. So, "Do you like music?" Got a very clear, almost an inflection in the voice, like he was insulted. "Of course." And my grandson, quick thinking, he says, "Can you play for us?" And we get a "Yes, sir." And then we proceeded to get guitar music. kind of fading in and out, but definite of the period acoustic guitar. And by then, Destiny, our guide, had come back. I looked at her. Her eyes are wide open. Her mouth is open. She's staring at this spirit box. This music went on for several minutes, maybe 10 minutes. When it finally faded out, I said, "Wow, you're good." And the voice says, "Thank you." And I said, "Can you play some more?" "Yes, sir." And we got more music. We had mandolin and harmonica kick in with music. At this point, I'm thinking, this is just crazy. That this has to be a hoax. Absolutely has to be a hoax. So I'm trying to figure out how they did this. On the one hand, Destiny seemed very sincere, and I didn't really think she would pull something on us. Being a journalist for many, many years, I've kind of developed a sense for when somebody's trying to pull one over on you. But no,
Sure.
This is, and then after that, and I'll kind of wind this up. But she said again, "Is anyone with us?" "Yes." "What's your name?" And we got a clear 3-syllable on. Or can you enunciate more clearly? Several times we got this name. There was a very clear on and like an S sound at the end, but we couldn't quite make it out. But then she proceeds to ask, "How old are you?" We got a 20, and then we got a captain.
Whoa.
Whoa. And so I'm asking, "Where are you from?" We couldn't quite understand it. I start rattling off states, a number of states. When I got to Ohio, I got a "Yes, sir." And I said, "Oh, my grandson and I are from Ohio." And both the EMF meters that Connor and I held, which we couldn't get to barely blip the whole night, went to the very top level and stayed there for several seconds and came back down. Just absolutely amazing. And I'm still thinking at this point, this has to be a hoax. And there was more to it. But at the very end, Destiny said, "Are you hurt, or were you hurt?" And this still bothers me to this day. We got this blood-curdling, just sheer mix of terror and pain, male voice screaming, a prolonged scream, and then a woman crying at the end. And that kind of put the end to that. Some other people came on the bridge, we left. Now, I went home intent on proving that this was a hoax. The more I researched, the more I talked to people, the more I found out, no, you can't broadcast to this type of machine. This is how they work, and this probably happened. When I decided to write the book is when I started looking into the historical context. Said, okay, did any Ohio captains die at Gettysburg? Yes, there were 7 of them. Okay, what were their names, ages? One of them jumped out at me. His name is Mahlon Briggs. 3 syllables, clear on. He may have died at Sachs Bridge. He was mortally wounded day 1 of the battle, was captured, and he could have been one of those left at Sachs Bridge to die. That more than anything I've ever experienced just made an impact on me.
For someone who has been publishing for a very long time and it has its own brand, and you publish under your own banner, give the folks out there a sense of encouragement in terms of keeping with it. What is some advice you would give somebody who wants to pursue it in that direction?
If you really want to make a living at it, you have to go in with your eyes wide open, knowing that it isn't easy. It is very hard work. It's also can be extremely fun and extremely rewarding. The thing for me is publicity. I have to work at it. I really I sit down and I do lists. This is who I want to talk to. This is what I want to get out of it. And you have to have almost a daily list, and it's a constant churn. If you don't publicize your book, no one's going to know it's there, and no one's going to buy it. No one's going to read it.
What do you cherish most about being an indie published author?
The freedom and the independence is just incredible. I know that when I put my imprint on a book, it is what I want it to be. We've also published books by other authors, and it's rewarding for me to work with them and to share my vision and also respect theirs, and just, you know, being able to make someone else's work better and successful is almost as exciting for me as having my own work be out there and be successful. But yeah, being able to just do it my way is just incredibly valuable and rewarding.
What's different about publishing someone else's work as opposed to publishing your own? What do you remove from the process?
I try to really open myself to the author, to their message, to their personality, to what they're hoping to accomplish with the book. And I really try to remove my judgment from it. I think my role, where I feel I bring the most value, is just in clarity and conciseness, of maybe cutting out extraneous things, of really having the writer focus on what their goal, what their intent is. But when it comes down to really their voice and their intent, I try to stay out of the way of that.
Mic check, 1 2 1 2.
Hey everyone, JB Taylor here. Joe Compton has given me the great privilege of reviewing audiobooks for this show, and to start you all off, I am going to be recommending The Woman of the Void by Sunshine Somerville. I enjoyed this story. It reminded me of the Merlin TV series from 1998. It was very fantastical. It blended all the things I like. Fantasy, science fiction, some action, adventure. It was a wonderful story. Basically, not to spoil anything, but there is a prophecy, and the woman at the center of the story is the center of this prophecy, but her situation is very unique. She has someone very, very close to her looking over her shoulder, controlling her actions, and she has to overcome him, and that's not easy. She comes to learn of what destiny, what fate has in store for her, but because of her circumstances, well, it's not really easy. She has to escape, and not only that, but once out, she has to survive in a world where the cards are stacked against her, because that person looking over her shoulder pretty much runs everything, controls everything. Does she get out? Who knows? I'm not going to tell you. It's just a beautiful, beautiful blend. It's like Game of Thrones, Babylon 5, Merlin. It's just really, really neat how all these genres are blended together. It's just quite cool. What I liked quite a bit was how the whole of it wasn't dependent upon just sorcery. It used the science fiction, it used the fantasy, it played with prophecy, and it played with angst and terror and suspense, and it made you want more. This audiobook is read by Hannah Davidson. As for the narration, it was hit and miss for me. Hannah Davidson overall did a pretty good job. There were some voices that she could have done better. Pacing could have been a little bit crisper, more crisp. Well, I mean, that's really just kind of nitpicking because I'm a bit of an audiobook snob. I don't try to be it. I just kind of am because I've listened to so many. But overall, she holds my attention. She's good, not great, but good, and yeah, it's a unique story. It's one that you won't come across too often because it's very hard for a writer to do one genre right. but to blend, that's difficult. And Sunshine Somerville nails it. I highly recommend it. 5 out of 5, no doubt about it. So that's my review. The Woman of the Void by Sunshine Somerville, which, by the way, has a great cover. If you haven't seen the cover yet, you're in for a treat. It's beautiful. It's gorgeous. But yeah, definitely 5 out of 5. A high recommendation from me. Peace.
Is getting old, right? I've been thinking about it, like, I could get married and go to DMV and change my name, right? I could get a sex change, go in and change my gender. Like, why can't I just knock a clean 10 years off my ID, right? Like, make the age on my ID match my age on Facebook. Just tell my friends from high school, like, I'm 10 years younger than you now. Like, I've noticed in LA, like, a lot of people stay young. Like, they're like a teenager well into their 50s. Yeah, it's true. And I've broken it down. I realized that the secret to staying young forever is to never commit to anything. I mean nothing. Like, don't even commit to dinner plans. Like, always leave a little room, like, just in case something better comes along. Right? You call it flaking, I call it contingency planning.
Well, I hope you've enjoyed what we've presented in this episode. We have one more segment to go with director Peter Simon giving us a very unique and interesting look at our past into our present. A very poignant piece, a short film that I think you'll enjoy. You know, we talked about in the opening how, while I was at Slam Dance, by the way, I'm home now, hi. But we talked about how you don't have an age limit when it comes to creating art. There is no right age. There is no young, old, in-between age that would help you peak when you create art. Now, of course, experience and life lessons and everything lends itself to art sometimes, and that gets better or gets more prominent with age. But, in the truth be told, you don't know what kind of life anybody leads. And a lot of people have lived a full life at a very young age. So there is a lot to be said for that, as well as naivety, being that sometimes those are the most positive messages that come from making movies or writing books or just a sharing. You know, we love escape. We love the innocence of it. We love the idea of it, and sometimes that has no need for experience or prominence in terms of age. So when you look at art subjectively, you find that at any age, anybody who takes the time, who makes the effort, because it is an effort and it does take a lot to create art, deserves praise, deserves a look. And I think that was very, very much a part of what this episode was all about. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Peter to talk about his short film, and we will move forward and see you again very soon. Our next episode, which is episode 24, will feature all of my experiences at Slam Dance. A little glimpse of it here in this episode, and you'll get a even more bigger glimpse of it on our This Week in Indie show. If you haven't checked out our This Week in Indie show, it's on our Facebook page at facebook.com/GoIndieNow. Go check that out and like our page, and then you'll never miss an episode. Our next episode, if you're watching this when this drops, will be on February 8th. They're always available, though, to go check out. We have all of them archived on that Facebook page, so go there, check them out, and watch the ones you haven't seen, because there's always some great information, there's always some great indies to discover, and there's always great art to take a look at as well. And we have our coffee break season going still strong. That will drop another episode here on Sunday and continue on until the season is over. That'll be every Sunday. You'll see a new episode that's on this YouTube channel that you're watching this video from. Or if you're not on the YouTube channel watching this video, click on the subscribe button. We'd love to have you. We'd love to show you what else we do. We have live panels coming up, which we have another one coming up in February as well, which is all about the love of horror and the horror of love. A little take on Valentine's Day in an opposite direction, but I think you'll enjoy that panel. I've put together a really good group of panelists who are going to give you a lot of insight into the wicked and interesting that comes with the macabre. All right, everybody. With that, it's always time to go indie now. We'll see you next episode.
Hi, I'm Peter Simon. I'm a Denver-based filmmaker. Back in 2011, my wife and I moved out here from New York. And at that time, I went back and read On the Road by Jack Kerouac because I remember a lot of the book was set here in Denver. I took all the Denver sections of the book and condensed them down into a 7-page script. And the film you're about to see is a result of that process. One thing I'm proud of about KEROUAC'S Denver is that everyone who worked on the film was paid for their work. When I'm not doing my own projects, I'm a freelance camera assistant. I don't give my work away for free, and I wouldn't expect anyone to do the same on my projects. I think you could best categorize KEROUAC'S Denver as either a literary or art house film. So without any further ado, here's KEROUAC'S Denver.
In the spring, I had a few dollars saved from my time in the Army, and I went out to Denver, thinking of settling down there. I met a kid named Henry on the way. He'd just gotten out of Leavenworth. The two of us hitched a ride from Kansas with a guy named Wayne. He let us off at Larimer Street. I stumbled along with the most wicked grin of joy in the world. I took Henry by the arm to pawn his penitentiary suit. All of Larimer Street was overrun with ex-cons trying to sell their prison-spun threads. He ended up with the thing under his arm in a paper bag and walked around in brand-new jeans and a sports shirt. We went to Dean's old Glenarm bar. On the way, Henry threw the suit in the trash can. Dean Moriarty was the son of a wino, one of the most tottering bums on Larimer Street, and he had in fact been brought up generally on Larimer Street and thereabouts. Dean used to plead in court at the age of 6 to have his father set free. He used to beg in front of Larimer alleys and sneak the money back to his father, who waited among the broken bottles with an old buddy. With the weather getting warmer in the Rockies, everything seemed possible. Dean, who had the tremendous energy of a new kind of American saint, and Carlo were the underground monsters of that season in Denver. Together with the pool hall gang, they symbolized this most beautifully. Carlo had a basement apartment on Grant Street, and we all met there many a night that it went till dawn. In the morning, we'd all file out and go up the alley. I wanted to see Denver 10 years ago when the local guys were all children in the sunny cherry blossom morning of springtime in the west. Those mountains, the magnificent Rockies that you can see from any part of town, would grow red as the great sun rose from the eastern plains. I spent an entire week of afternoons in lovely Denver bars where the waitresses wear slacks and cut around with bashful, loving eyes. Not hardened waitresses, but waitresses that fall in love with the clientele and have explosive affairs and puff and sweat and suck from one bar to another. I wandered around that day. Seeing me as a bum on Larimer Street maybe was Dean's father. Old Dean Moriarty, they called him, the tinsmith. I went into the Windsor Hotel where father and son had lived. I walked around the sad honky-tonks of Curtis Street, abandoned storefronts, movie marquees, saloons. Beyond the glittering street was darkness, and beyond the darkness, the west. At dusk, as I walked, I felt like a speck on the surface of the sad, red earth. I passed the Windsor Hotel again, kept looking for the sad, fabled tinsmith of my mind. Either you find someone who looks like your father in places like Montana, or you look for a friend's father where he is no more. Down at 23rd and Welton, a baseball game was going on under floodlights. The strange, young heroes of all kinds were on the field, performing with heartbreaking seriousness. Never in my life as an athlete had I ever permitted myself to perform like this in front of families and girlfriends and kids from the neighborhood, at night, under lights. Always it had been at college, big time, sober-faced, no boyish human joy like this. Now it was too late. Oh, the sadness of the lights that night. The young pitcher looked just like Dean. The pretty blonde in the seats looked just like Mary Lou. It was the Denver night. All I did was die. Despite my aspirations, I could tell that my moments in Denver were coming to an end. I could feel it when I walked Rita home. On the way back, I stretched out on the grass of an old church with a bunch of hobos. And their talk made me want to get back on that road. Every now and then, one would get up and hit a passerby for some spare change. They talked of the harvest moving north. The evening was warm and soft. I wanted to go and get Rita again and tell her a lot more things and really make love to her this time and calm her fears about men. Boys and girls in America have such a sad time together. Sophistication demands that they submit to sex immediately without proper preliminary talk. Not courting talk, real straight talk about souls. For life is holy, and every moment is precious. I heard the Denver and Rio Grande locomotive howling off to the mountains, and I knew I would pursue my star farther into the western night.